We're here today. It looks like Maui, doesn't it? Beautiful. I took this picture from the deck of our condo in a town called Kahana, which is about 10 miles or so north of what used to be Lahaina. So this show, although it's about global repatriation 2.0, it's in honor of two things. First of all, Maui, West Maui, which is where Lahaina is, needs tourism. So go spend some money. We're going to do that. So the show is also dedicated to Jimmy Buffett. So the Hawaiian shirt has two meanings. Joanne and I went to, so we live in downtown, 92101, San Diego, and there's a new hotel, an old hotel with a new name called Margaritaville. And that's part of the franchise that Jimmy Buffett invented. Really successful. Anyway, we went there on Saturday afternoon, walked over to the Gaslamp District. So the Margaritaville Hotel is located just behind Petco Park, which is where the Padres play. So we went up to the pool bar and sat at the bar, and I ordered a margarita, of course. Cheers to Jimmy Buffett. So today's program is about repatriation, which is really different, but I think people who are repatriating need help. They need guidance. They need a roadmap. The people who are coming on this program in just a few minutes have experience and know-how, either from being repatriated once, multiple times perhaps, or manage people or help people. Okay, so get ready to take notes, and we'll be right back with Global TV Talk Show, all about repatriation 2.0. And thank you for being on Global TV. Really appreciate it. Thank you. So this is Ed, and I'm not in Maui, although it looks it. I'm in San Diego, 92101. It's about 5 a.m. here, and we have a worldwide program that's broadcasting live today in many time zones. And with us in the studio, bright and early here, is Lachelle Tinder, who's a corporate nomad these days, and welcome. And Sue Shinimiya, I hope I didn't butcher that name too bad.
Shinomiya is good.
Yeah, okay. And you're in Portland, Oregon, and you have deep experience in Japan, and we're going to get into that in a minute. And Iliana Ferber is a long time with ExxonMobil, now in Texas. Welcome. And Doreen, my friend, welcome.
Thank you, Ed. I'm just sorting out my video here.
Yeah, we all are sorting things out. It's really only my first cup of coffee. I'm going to get up in a minute and get more.
Good idea.
A whole tank.
Yeah, okay. And so Doreen is a longtime expat with Saudi Arabia and beyond, and she's now in Mexico. Is that right?
That is correct. I'm residing in Mexico. It's my 8th country to live in.
That's terrific. All right. Okay. So Yvonne, my friend, welcome.
Hi, Ed.
Welcome.
Hi.
Hi,
Nice
Kerwin. Good evening.
Hello, hi.
Hi, Kerwin. Okay, so we're going to grow this thing. There's going to be a lot of headshots on this, and so we're going to start to introduce each other now. Okay, so Yvonne Quack is. Are you in Washington? Where are you?
I'm in Europe. I'm in France at the moment.
Oh, well, bonjour, bonsoir.
Bonjour.
Yeah,
Bonjour.
Right. Okay. So, Yvonne, would you please introduce yourself real quick?
Well, my name is Yvonne Kwa. I'm from Singapore, but I have been an expat for at least 30 years, to say the least. I have lived in many countries in Asia, Asia mainly, and Europe and America. And I'm the author of Whose Career? Yours, Mine, or Ours. Dual career is something that I feel very strongly about, particularly in relation to gender parity and helping women find their voice in having the careers that they want to have. And I also work for the World Bank Family Network. And yeah, and I support globally mobile population in particular with careers.
Well, I really appreciate you doing this, and I thank you so much for your kind interest to be involved in our London event in late November. Andy Elliman, thank you for joining us from England. And Mike Witowski, thank you for showing up from Jersey. Are you in Jersey or New York?
Jersey.
Jersey, okay. Well, do you know Lachelle Tinder?
Of course.
Well, there she is. Right. Okay, everybody, this is live, and we're going to grow this. There'll be additional people joining us as we get going. Some people need to leave early, and others will come in later. So it's like Penn Station in New York, coming and going. Okay, so let's talk about Repatriation 2.0. I called it that because we did repatriation about a month or so ago, and we've had the topic over the past couple of years, but this is such a hot topic. And my thing, and I'm just a happy TV talk show host, really. You guys are the experts, and so I just coordinate stuff, okay, and bring people together from across time, from across space, from across silos, from across cultures and borders. And as you can see, from across generations. And I think our youngest person on this program is going to be Lachelle. Hello. But you have
I'm the youngest.
but you have deep experience, and everyone is going to share their own experience of managing repatriation for others or actually living it and doing it, and some of the BS that goes with it, and also some of the joy and the discovery, the self-discovery. And we have such talent here. It's just great. So this program, when it's broadcast out to the world, subsequent to today's original recording, will have more than 100,000 viewers, because, and I can say that with clarity, it's even going to be a lot more, but it's too big. I can't understand. I can't get my head around all those numbers, but I can say it'll be more than 100,000 because of my LinkedIn connections, which are already valid in there. And this is a business to business audience. It's not willy-nilly consumer. And so we're going to talk business here. My thing is, set the stage. Who benefits most from an international assignment? Is it the company? Is it the assignee? Or is it the service providers? So this is open mic, open source. This is an idea exchange. And I want to go first to Jason Will, who's a first-time visitor, and he's based in mainland China. Is that Shanghai?
Shanghai, correct. Yeah.
Yeah. And you are what, country manager for Asian Tigers?
Yeah, mainland China.
Good. I want you to meet Andy Elliman, who's in England, and he's with AGS Worldwide. So you guys probably interact somehow along the way.
Well, we're more or less competitors, but I have a good relationship with the guy in China, Thomas here. So we're buddies. So it's all good.
Yeah, that's cool. Mike Witowski is, as I said, in New Jersey, New York area. We've known each other 20 years or so. And he's an expert in economics, economic information relevant to international mobility. Mike, why don't you introduce yourself a lot better than I just did?
Well, thank you. I'm not sure economic, puts me in the very, very narrow spotlight here, which I'm not sure I'm going to live up to. But overall, it's been great experience in terms of mobility. sort of managing mobility programs as well as consulting on mobility programs, and then being involved with the technology aspect on the mobility side. So yeah, thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, so your voice matters, not only from your own experience, but because you know everybody in the industry. So Mike has been a speaker at our live meetings in the past, primarily in the New York market, where for several years he was headquartered in Rockefeller Center, right in the middle of everything there. And his insight into, in fact, I think you came to the meeting we did in Toronto at BMO, up top in their headquarters. Yeah. Yeah. So it's really interesting. So you have all this experience. So have you met Yvonne Quay from the World Bank?
No, I haven't.
All right, Mike. So Mike has years of experience with a company called ECA, which is Economic Information. That's why I said all that. Doreen has been, pardon me, I got a frog in the throat here. Doreen has been an expat for many years. She's a former diplomat, but also because her spouse was an executive for many years in Saudi Arabia, Saudi Aramco. Would you like to give us a quickie on yourself?
Certainly. Hi, everybody. Good morning. How are you? It's very exciting to me that Ed suggested that he would like to really dig deeper into the topic of repatriation. I have been writing a book on repatriation for about the last 4 to 5 years. I completed a book called Life in the Camel Lane, and I know Yvonne because we were in a book circle together. And while she was writing her book on dual careers overseas. And I'm just really excited that people are paying attention to the subject. I hope that my book, which I'm not sure the name of, some days it's going to be called Aftermath, and other days it's just going to be home again, jiggity jig, because I believe that repatriation lives somewhere between those two experiences, not only for the corporation, but also for the employee and the family.
So a lot of repatriation today. Excuse me for interrupting. I've got a big mouth today at 5 a.m. So, Kerwin, welcome and thank you. I know you're really busy these days, and thank you for this 8 p.m. encounter. And have you met Jason Will? He's in mainland China right now, and Kerwin is in Singapore.
I don't think so. I mean, I've met World Bank people before at these conventions that we have, but no, I don't think so.
Okay, that's Yvonne, and Yvonne is originally from Singapore and now in France, and Kerwin is in Singapore right now. Kerwin, thank you for doing this, and your new position with Hewlett-Packard Enterprise is elevated beyond the world of global mobility. It's now the world of compliance, and the two are really coming together, or they already are. And your embodiment of that role in such an enterprising company as HP gives it agency. I mean, you are the leader. I'm not here to butter you up, but I'm trying to give you a perspective, give everybody who's watching this thing perspective on the importance of compliance in the world of mobility.
Well, thank you again. I still my sweet spot still what I've done for the last 7 years running the global program for HPE. Prior to that, running talent acquisition for the region, and then prior to that, all over HR, whatever the pad was, building shared services, doing outsourcing, different parts, payroll, HR. So it's been a lot of fun and being able to see how the different parts, different functional parts of the organization come together, converge, to be able to fulfill the why of mobility. And for me, that's crucial before we discuss, a lot of those on repatriation. Because at the end of the day, to your first question, who benefits? The investor who has, or benefactor of the Y of mobility for whatever move that is.
Yeah, very good. We're going to have everybody talk. Everybody will share ideas, and please use the chat thing on the bottom there. And no sales pitches, of course, but please put down your email, your website, your phone number if you want, but not your age. And the thing is that we want to have networking happen here. So Sue is an expert. Her business is called Global Business Passport, and she has a specialty in Japan. Sue, we'll take it from there.
Thank you so much. It's a real pleasure to be invited back to one of your sessions, Edwin. This is a lovely group, a big group. I am in Portland, Oregon, and with Global Business Passport, I work mostly with Fortune 500 type companies who are struggling to close cultural gaps across complexities and differences of all kinds. And one of the areas that I do a lot of work in is in global mobility. So this topic is near and dear to my heart. I was about 10 years in Japan, and when I came back in the I guess it'd be late 90s, I really struggled. Even though I'm an interculturalist of many years, I should know better. I had this very high-paying, rigorous, very large responsibility in my managerial role in Intel as an embedded consultant in Japan. And I planned my exit really well, but not my reentry. So I personally had a very difficult time when I came back to the US. And so I have a kind of special place in my heart for this repatriation idea. I think as Kerwin pointed out, there's a whole system involved. So when you talk about who benefits and who grows and who gets the most from it, yeah, the investor, but I also feel strongly, since I work with the clients who do go overseas and then come back, that what you can stand to gain as a human being by having a really well-planned and well-executed and well-facilitated expatriate experience, and then have something on the receiving end when you come back to kind of capture what your key learnings were, in addition to your technical expertise or the context that you made, etc. But what does it gain to? How do you gain as a human being in gaining that global perspective? And if that is seen as an asset, then great, that can really be beneficial to everybody involved. And that includes family members, but there's a whole lot around that. So hopefully we'll get a chance to talk about that as well.
Andy Elliman, welcome again. So Andy and I, we're fortunate, I was fortunate to be in London with Andy's help and his connection at the bank HSBC. And altogether, we produced a live meeting, my first live meeting in 3.5 years, this past May 9 at HSBC in London. And it was thankfully a successful event. And I'm honored that they've actually invited me to come back. So we're going to do it in late November. Andy, will you take it from there and tell us about AGS today? And also, don't forget to talk about your experiences and your crazy adventures.
Yeah, sure. Nice to meet everyone. Good to see a few familiar faces as well. And always good to see you, Edwin. So we're doing another event in November back at HSBC's building. Last time we did it was very good. We had a whole day with different corporates that came, different discussions, and this time, we're really structuring it to be something quite different again, to make it current as well. So looking forward to that in November, Edwin. The AGS group, we are in 99 countries ourselves. We're a family-run business. The company's been going for nearly 50 years now, and we specialize in immigration, relocation, and moving services. So yeah, you'll know us quite well. Jason, I know you know our guys out there. We do compete, but we compete friendly. Our industry is an interesting industry because we provide a service to help you relocate your staff internationally on a global basis. But we also get involved with lots of things that they're not for us to manage, but we see it, if that makes sense. So when you're moving families, and what you just said, Sue, as well, you know, when you're moving families, you see a very different side to things. You know, the service that we're providing, yes, we need them to move. Yes, we want to relocate them, right? But when we see people repatriate, for instance, it's a really interesting area. I've been in the industry now for 36, nearly 37 years, can you believe? And I used to do the physical moving myself. I used to drive trucks across Europe for 12 years. I did the actual physical moving. And I was in the home and I saw a lot of this firsthand, where people moved backwards and forwards. And, you know, you got to know families that you moved over the years from country to country, especially across Europe. And then you move them back to their home country. The thing I would say, and the thing that we do notice a lot of, is people really struggle to settle back into their own country when they've lived away for so long. And when that happens, what we see a lot is, like, you'll see someone move back to their home country and give it a year and they're already looking for the next assignment to go out and travel again. So it's I can't answer why, but I think they find it difficult sometimes to adjust back into their old lives, if that makes sense. And maybe the job role is not what they used to do. You know, maybe they've gone on, their careers taken off, and all of a sudden they're brought back to the country where they started, and they feel like it's a little bit of a step back. Maybe I don't know. I'm just making assumptions here, but we see a lot of it, and I would say a lot of the people that we repatriate home, 6 to 12 months later, we're moving them again, and it's quite common to see that. I imagine you'll probably find the same, Jason, from your side in
well, certainly from Asia. I mean, you know, they say our expat sport here. I mean, they have maids, they have drivers. They, you know, the lifestyle is quite social. It's quite convenient. So, you know, and they call us, you used to call it reverse culture shock. I don't know if that's still being used, but you have these dreams of living back in your home country and how, you know, around friends and family and the food and everything else. But the reality is, you know, when you go back, and as Andy said, after a while you go through the honeymoon stage, and then after the honeymoon stage where it's so wonderful being back, then, you know, you're missing your old life. So yeah, we definitely see the same thing when people leave Asia, that they'll pop up again in 6 months, 12 months, or something like that. So for sure.
Yeah, thank you. Liana, so we met through an introduction from a mutual friend in Mexico, and I thank you for being on this program. Please, pardon me, please introduce yourself better than me. She has originally from Venezuela, living in Texas now with her family, but has years of ExxonMobil experience and helping companies and people deal with international economics, I guess, and making it work from a business point of view. Ileana. Yeah.
Thank you, Ed, for having me here, and nice meeting you, everyone. You all have a really amazing background. As Ed said, I'm from Venezuela, born and raised there. And I have to say that I was also born and raised at ExxonMobil, started really early at Mobil, even before the merger, and then stayed until last year when I decided to do my own thing. And I was an expat, I would say twice. One, I would say it was a formal when ExxonMobil sent me to Russia, to Sakhalin Island, which is an island above Japan. But I would say, like, my first expat experience was when I moved here to the US, because everything, the experience, everything just felt like that expat assignment. In terms of my role, I see expat assignments and repatriation from a different perspective, even though I actually was one and went through the whole process of repatriating. But I see it now more from the local content perspective, or localization, which is more related to local economic development. For those familiar with the oil and gas industry, it's a very intense industry, and it's a lot of technology, high risk, and everything. So whatever you're going to have, oil and gas operation or a project, there's going to be a lot of expats, a lot of people from different backgrounds and different professional skills, different skill levels. And it's part of the three components of local content, the three components that I define local content. One is workforce development, which includes the recruiting and training of local workforce. The supplier development, which is also training and preparing, making local suppliers more competitive. And the part that I'm very passionate is the knowledge transfer or technology transfer. And that's where I see the role of expats play an important role, because they are the vehicles, the agents of knowledge transfer. Knowledge transfer, it's the know-how, the tacit knowledge, not the one that you get from a website or a manual. It's the one that it's embedded in our brains, and the only way to transfer it is to be with that person and have that connection with the people. And it doesn't happen overnight. It happens throughout the years. And for me to see that you transfer knowledge, it has an average period of 3 years or so. So it depends on the skill. But so to the initial question that you asked, Ed, who really benefits? I think everyone benefits, the company, the expat, but I think the nationals are the ultimate beneficiaries of expatriates, because they get all this influx of people with all this knowledge. And I also work with advocating for foreign investment in those countries, because the governments tend to create local content legislations and kind of protect the people, that the jobs are for the nationals, in everything. But what if the nationals are not prepared, don't have that capacity, don't have the skills? Then you need to bring expats. And there are some countries that want to regulate that. In Russia, there were quotas for how many people you can have in country. And they don't see how important is that piece, those agents of tacit knowledge transfer.
That's political. So, Lachelle Tinda, thank you so much for coming back on the program. In the past, just a quick intro. So, Lachelle has worked for international companies in very senior roles, all within mobility, talent acquisition to deployment. So, Lachelle, you work for Skanska, is that correct? A Swedish construction company that built some of the new airports around, and other things, and also H&M, the fashion store.
Yeah, so I had regional roles for those, heading up the Americas. And I've also been on the supplier side, and like so many of you, also been an expat myself. So it's interesting listening to each one of you. I can identify with a number of things. And I think that, looking at repatriation and understanding, what's behind it. I used to speak, and Yvonne, I don't know if you were in the room so many years ago. I think it was back in 2004, 2005. I spoke on repatriation, and I likened it to a heat shield, coming back from space. You started this off saying that we were coming from space right now. So I likened it to coming back from space, that if we didn't have that heat shield built around us, we were going to crash and burn. And I think that, it's hard to know what that looks like, because everybody's reentry is so different. We were a failed repatriation, very much like COVID, where people were brought back without a lot of planning. Ours was also because we were living in Venezuela. So Ileana, you can relate to this. We came back in January of 2003, at the height of when we were in the midst of the Paro Nacional, at the national strike. And, it was a very chaotic time. So then, going back to, what are the jobs that you're coming back to? There was no planned job. Let's just throw him in a position, because we need to get him back to the US with the family. So sometimes there is planning and sometimes there isn't. When there isn't, I think that heat shield becomes even far more important. And I think that this is why, for me, repatriation, whenever I was at these companies, was always super important. I would start preparing people before they ever left. I would talk to them about what is repatriation like? Talk to others, listen to their stories, start preparing for that, because you come back changed. So, you know, going back to what are the reasons and who benefits, professional development is a huge piece of this. So, you know, be thinking about what are you looking for? You will be changed by your experience, and understanding that if you're not prepared for that change, it's going to look very different. We left, you know, in a period of time when there was no internet, you know, so it was very different, you know, coming back to all of the things that were going on post-internet and post 9/11. So it's not just how do you change, it's how does the world around you change, and how do your friends move on. So there's no way to, I think, truly prepare for repatriation, but I think you can at least become more aware. And then hopefully that helps your reintegration back. And whether you stay or you don't, that's the next question. You know, what do you do with it once you get back?
Okay, Doreen, let's talk about the psychological impact of feeling hurt. Because when you come back in, now I haven't done this, but I've listened to these stories for years now. And so I'm just regurgitating, and I'm going to stop talking in just a minute and let you talk because you're the expert, Doreen. If were I to be coming back from an assignment into San Diego or my original hometown in Boston, people will remember me, but they won't have two words to say to me, and I'm going to be the outsider. And I would
Exactly, and
think
that's
that
what,
would be
yeah.
hurtful.
Many repatriated people find themselves in a situation where they're the outsider and the misfit. And it's difficult to find an entree into society. And if you're returning to the West or the US, it is more difficult than it has ever been. In 2018, we did a survey of about 300 repatriates. And in that survey, for the professional side of it, they found that their international experience was dismissed, that their lived experiences overseas, and frequently their languages and their cultural competencies, were all dismissed. And so they felt very invisible. On the personal side, the women and the families and the guys who were the accompanying spouses also said the same thing. That belonging is the hardest thing to do because you've changed on the inside, but not only have you changed on the inside because of your lived experience, the people in your own family and in your best friends, they've moved on and they have changed. They found new activities, they found new skills, they found new partners. And so it's challenging. And I think what Lachelle said is the lack of awareness is huge, and we need to learn how to prepare people better for this situation. But also there's a lot of unintended consequences of going overseas. And that's something that we can't prepare for.
Yvonne,
But
you
I
must.
think I was going to say, to build on what Lachelle was saying, I think thinking through systemically from the beginning, if you're talking about managing populations as a whole, not individual families, it begins with when you send them out, you know, preparing them well, and also teaching them certain skills about going from assignment to assignment, which they then will apply with returning, which is finishing well. And often with corporates, the finishing is rushed because all of a sudden you have to be in a country for 3 months, within 3 months or 6 weeks sometimes. And the working person goes ahead, family follows, and there is no time to actually finish well on the emotional side. So you pick up the mess, so you don't start well because you didn't finish well. And I think go back to repatriation, I think there are two distinct buckets: involuntary and voluntary. Involuntary is what Lachelle was talking about. There's a crisis in the country, there's a coup, there's some geographical incident, earthquake, volcano, everyone's evacuated. So you don't have the time to say goodbye. You leave your favorite things. Sometimes you pack a suitcase and you go. And then you have the voluntary repatriation where you choose to go home. And you make that decision to go home. But sometimes what makes repatriation so hard, especially with families, is people repatriate very differently. Even two children, siblings. Sibling A thrives on being home. Sibling B just hates every bit of being home. So I think a lot of it is, I think Doreen's right. There are things you can prepare for and things you can't. And I remember when we went back to England briefly after Asia, and yes, Jason, I do miss the maids, not the drivers, because I don't like being driven by a man, but the maids, definitely, right? And I remember getting a call from the Philippines and saying, we need you to come back. Mr. Vargas wants you to do all the workshops on repatriation. And I said, I'd rather do a workshop on repatriation than repatriate myself, because that is the most difficult of all transitions, and it's research-based. As to what I think either Doreen or Lachelle said, you come back changed. And people have changed too, but everybody has the expectation that you are the same person that left. And when you are different, they think, oh, what's happened? And often it's misunderstood that now you have become a little bit grand because you had the maids and the drivers, which is not true. You don't become grand because of that. But, again, trying to understand why is she now different? She's not the best friend that left home. She has differences. So I'll stop there on reputation. What?
Sorry, I want to add something, because all that Yvonne and Doreen has said, it just actually reminded me of my situation in when it was a voluntary or involuntary. But in my case, I was the expat, the mom, the wife, and my husband had to be the stay-at-home mom, live in a compound full of women. And everybody, in a way, make fun of, Mr. Mom and everything. And my girls, I have two daughters that were 2 and 4. And I actually had to hire a nanny to do the things that I couldn't do because I was working. Things like, doing their hair or play with dolls and all that. So it was hard on me as a woman, but it was also hard on my husband because we have all the roles switched. And I was always, at the end of the day, I was a tired mom, and the girls wanted more of me. So, but the interesting thing that someone told me before going, and this is about the prep, you're never prepared, but they said the good thing of the expat assignment is that it can destroy your family, or it can make your family stronger. And in my case, it made my family stronger, even though it destroyed a little bit at the beginning because of all the switch of the roles. But on the other side, I was talking to my daughters now; they are teenagers, and what they remember is the quality time that I gave them instead of the what I needed to forcing myself to do. They remember the quality time instead of the quantity. And I don't have really memories of daddy in Russia. I remember you playing with this and that. So it made a change. But it's really something that it changed you. It changed the whole family. It defined who you are professionally and as a person. And it hurts coming back. It hurts coming back for different reasons. And you feel strange, but it also makes you analyze, did I make the right decision? And for me as a woman, even arriving in Russia, a really weird place, the first thing that I did when the plane landed was crying, because I had all this stress from the movie. And then the other thing is, what did I do? Where did I bring my family? And I cry. And my husband, I remember he shaking me. your boss is not going, the first thing that your boss is going to say is not going to be a crying woman. Just so, it was so much because of the weight of that responsibility. So it is tough on the family, on the psychological side.
Yeah.
And
Ed-
you know, to that point, oh, sorry, go ahead, Ed.
No, please go ahead.
Oh, Mike, sorry, I wasn't sure who was talking.
Go ahead, Michelle.
I think, you know, kind of coming back to the point of the family and what happens, I can relate to both sides. And I remember a call very distinctly. Mary Kessel wrote for Wall Street Journal, and she may still write, but she did a lot of articles on mobility. And she calls me and she goes, I'm writing one on repatriation and divorce. And at that point, I was in the midst of my own. And we were very strong when we were overseas, but the repatriation it was really hard. I mean, it just, you know, you look at it and there was no way to understand the gravity of the emotional impact on people. And it's going to be different for every single person coming back. So that's why you can prepare on certain levels, but you can't prepare on others. But I think that what we can do is the more that we have conversations to normalize what you're going through, where we have organizations out there that are there to support the family, like Families in Global Transition. You know, you have these different organizations, and Yvonne, looking at, you know, that pre-preparation, and it's not just about, you know, getting that employed, but where you spend your space, getting that spouse ready for what's going to go, you know, what's going to happen whenever you're going out, so that you come back prepared. My background was in marketing. 11 years later, with internet, I had no idea what I was going to do in my life, you know. So there's so many pressures, you know, you just can't quantify it. But I think it's just sometimes, even as a service provider, being that listening ear. You know, you never know where your friend is going to be. It could be the guy that's, you know, your crew chief that's packing all your goods, and you're sitting out on your stoop crying because you're just not ready. And that person coming up and saying, are you okay? Sometimes you just need somebody to listen to you. And I've had that situation. So, you know, I think that everybody in the industry has an opportunity that maybe they can make a difference in some small way. You can't fix things maybe, but you can be there, and you can normalize the situation.
Kerwin, what do you think of all this?
I've focused a lot on definitely not the psychological stuff, preparing the individuals. I focus on program design. At the start of every assignment, we ask them to figure out, again, not the cost projection, but the why behind the move. And then you go back to, is it, you know, to generate revenue, deliver a project, do all of that? Is it knowledge transfer? Is it developmental? Is it anything else? And then based on whatever that goal is, again, design-wise, we tie some incentives. Uh, you know, help people be productive, maybe incentivize some of those, and definitely work on a little bit of retention. Again, nothing psychological other than focus on mission, focus on goal. Uh, Again, some context, because like think I've had since of my past, when I was doing TA, I would poach talent from competitors who were coming back from assignment, who were being sent there on a one-way transfer, because those are vulnerable talent based on all the stories we heard. Vulnerable talent. I would poach them, and it's easy. But since moving to mobility, I have to protect the talent who are vulnerable. And we try to do that with, again, usual HR stuff. So we try to put in like applied philosophies behind deferred compensation, high incentives versus achievement of goals, defer the release so they stay a little bit longer. If they finish earlier, complete the goal, exceed goal, then they get paid a lot more. So we work on those types of design, so the why of the move is fulfilled. Again, I understand from all of the conversations, there's a primary why that's laid out by the one who's paying for the move, and there are tangential why benefits for everybody else, family, the individual, etc. Even if the move is revenue generating, you hit those targets, we send you to client locations, do your stuff, develop markets, etc. At some point, the individual takes something back as well, professional development, something else. So again, happy for that. But that's, secondary to why of the move. Yeah, so that's what we get to, again, my experience, what we get to focus on, assignment the program, so the why is fulfilled.
So let's talk about Japan. Is this the same stuff, I imagine, but it's further complicated because of the uniqueness of Japan, I would assume.
It's an interesting question. Thank you for that. And I'm actually, what's interesting about that is you think with a country that's quite culturally different, like Japan to US, that's one of my vectors, that yes, it's complicated and can be challenging, but actually what I have found is some of the more challenging assignments are countries that sort of look similar, like US to England or US to Canada, because there's an assumption that that adjustment will be a little bit more seamless and a little bit more smooth. So at least with somewhere like Japan to US, you know you're going to be in for some culture shock. But yes, because you were in a culture that on a deeper, we use the cultural iceberg a lot in the work that I do, of thinking about what's hidden from view and what you can see. And there's a lot that's hidden in Japanese culture that hits you, bumps you on that kind of fundamental level of your values and your day-to-day behavior and what I call common sense notions. So sometimes if that changes, then that can be what makes it harder. That certainly made it harder for me to get back in step with the US job market, et cetera, when I came back. And other people as well tend to end up staying. And I think there's a lot to this idea of going back to what Kerwin was saying about, tying the incentives to it and making sure there's a whole system of it, because you want to retain this great talent if that talent is valued. And that's systemic within the organizations. They have to understand that this person has a global mindset now, and that's extremely valuable in this increasingly complex global and diverse work world that we are in. But for Japan to US in particular, it seems that sometimes people marry into the culture. I mean, that might be part of it too. That's what I did. I married a Japanese fellow. But in many cases, it's just you have this different set of opportunities, and you have in Japan, you don't have maids or what have you, but you have a kind of status perhaps in that country. And when you come back, you may or may not have that. I had one program, I was doing a repatriation program with a fellow who had spent 2 years, an executive in this case, it wasn't Japan, it was actually Australia. And he had turned that operation around. And we were walking down the hallway of his organization in the US, and some guy shouted out, "Hey, Bill, it's nice to see you back. Did you have a nice vacation?" So there's that out of sight, out of mind problem that can happen. But again, this is something that organizations have to understand and start to find the ways to value and make sure that there is the incentive for the receiving organization in place, so that people have a place to belong. And I love these conversations about that being out of step and how do you find that kind of reintegrate yourself, re-onboarding. That's a new term I'm just going to coin, but how do you do that?
And what I was going to mention is that based on Sue's feedback and then Kerwin's, I think, overall, arguably, repatriation is probably the best way to measure that ROI on assignment. And as Sue had mentioned, the reintegration, the retention, Kerwin has already kind of pointed out that within his organization, there are certain business measures. If you exceed or meet the certain expectations, you get paid more. But that's where for mobility professionals, kind of finding the solutions and finding the ways to hone in on those challenges is probably the best way to measure the ROI on assignment, especially when it comes down to family satisfaction, business goals, and the retention with the company, transfer of the knowledge, of course, as well. So there are all those measures, and for each company it will be different. And it doesn't have to be, arguably, it doesn't have to be repatriation. It's end of assignment period. It can be localization, it can be transferred to a different location. As long as those people stay with you, transfer the knowledge, make everybody better around them, and the family is happy. It's that those are the goals and the ROI measures that any organization can hone in on.
Mike, I know you're in transition currently. What would you like to be doing?
Well, how about that question? Well, I mean, I'm looking for, both in sort of internal mobility, sort of opportunities as well as business development on the technology sector with mobility. So that's where we are.
Great.
Thank you for the question.
Hey, listen, this is not rehearsed, as you can see. So,
Yeah,
so
seriously.
Andy, thank you for showing up and being involved here. Tell us about your strange expedition that you're working on.
Yeah, well, it's interesting listening to everyone. Especially the experiences that you've been openly talking about. And one of the things I would like to say is, like, I in my spare time, I'm an explorer. I do very unusual challenges, as Ed knows. I've climbed Everest a few times. I've got a world record for the highest dinner party in the world. I learned to swim and swam the English Channel through the pandemics. I take on the biggest challenges that you wouldn't expect. For a person, if you ever met me, you wouldn't think I could do any of this. But actually, listening to some of the things, it's a lot similar to what I do when I go on an expedition. So, for instance, when you go off to like Everest, you leave all your family alone. You go off to do the most selfish thing possible, to go and climb a mountain which you could die on, and you're gone for 10 weeks, and you're with a small bunch of people, maybe 10, 15 people that you have to get along with for that time of period as well. And you're sleeping in tents and you're sleeping rough, you're up in the mountains. It's glorious, but it's also, at the same time, it really brings out a lot within you. And the reason I'm making a comparison here is there's a couple of things. In 2015, I was going for the summit on Everest, got caught in the worst earthquake that Nepal's ever had, and I nearly died. Like, and when I came back, it was readjusting back into society. Now, the reason I say that is you don't just climb for 10 weeks. You spend 5 years training to do this. And that's what I did. Every day I was training, getting ready to climb Everest. So my whole life for 5 years was all about Everest, Everest, Everest. And then all of a sudden, within 40 seconds, an earthquake happens, and that's all taken away from you. And then I had to return back into normality with no goals, and so I can sort of relate to the repatriation side of families coming back from a journey where they've gone off on this huge journey, told all their family, told all their friends, it's going to change their lives. And yes, it does change their lives, but it's when they come back, how do they refit back into that? So I can sort of relate that to an expedition, which you wouldn't think that was possible. So I, apart from the AGS side, working in the relocation side, I also have a company called Stranger Expeditions, where, as it says, we take people on expeditions. But we actually expanded that earlier this year to Stranger Business, where we're now talking to companies about retaining their talent. And how do you retain your talent? And what do you do to keep people? And it's not always about money. Don't get me wrong, money is a big factor, but it's not always about money. People want to know that they're recognized within a company. They want to know how they're going to be rewarded within the company. So what we've done, we've done, and I'm still working with a group at the moment, which allows us to really dig deep into what is it that makes somebody stay within a company, and especially in this case, on a repatriation. How do you get them to stay? How do you lose your talent? I think Kurtwin explained they're the easiest to take away from a company when they come back. Right? So how do we stop that? So that's an area that we're actually working through at the moment. And I've got 4 or 5 different people that are special experts in this area. So it's a real open window at the moment. I find it very interesting.
So it's about coaching people, empathy, and dealing with getting people to open up about what they really love or hate.
Well, it's about getting the best out of your employee at the same time, because you've got to look at it from a business point of view as well. You know, they want that person to stay. Well, you hope they want that person to stay. Maybe they don't when they come back, but that's another story. But if they want them to stay, it's how do you get the best out of that person? So what we do, we build them up. We have a program that's we have a one-to-one with them once a month. We build up that person before they go on an expedition, and then after the expedition, we do another 3 months with that person as well. And we're just giving our life experiences, and then we help them to build their character, their confidence, and why they like to work within their company. And sometimes if you work for a company and the company of us are putting time into you by bringing in a company that are going to talk to you slightly differently. We're not interested in what they do for work, but what we find is, like, when you come back from an expedition, like me, my career completely took off. My angle was climbing Everest. When I came back from there, my whole career took off. I'm now the head of European business development for the AGS group. I never thought I'd reach there. You know, I was a moving guy that used to move boxes, and I've excelled right the way through purely because my passion was Everest. So what we do now, we take that and we use that with, like, the stranger expeditions that we have. So yeah, it's a whole concept that we've not just come up with, but we've been building for the last 3-4 years. So it's working quite well.
So you've taken your you were recognized by the ownership and as a hero, you know, as a guy who, because of the planning that you undertook and the rigid exercise program, made you a different person when you were applying yourself to helping customers. And that's the bridge.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, not a hero. I wouldn't say I'm a hero by any means, but it's all about looking at things slightly different. Things will change, all changed. Pandemic hit, everything changed. So, you know, my next expedition next year is all around pandemic. You know, it's all about the sort of mental health well-being that people have gone through the pandemic, and I'm trying to highlight that when I do my next expedition. But it's more than that. It's understanding that things will change, and I think that's not explained to people that go on these assignments. You know, they're told, yes, this is going to change your life. This is going to be, you know, you're going to have a fantastic time. You're going to earn X amount of money. You're going to, you know, they get all that package. They get that, but what they don't get is, like, and then when you come back, this is how you can use it. And I think if you were to explain to them that when they come back, there is a plan for them, and a lot of companies don't have a plan for them. So it's not even the assignee that we should be looking at. It's the way the companies attack this themselves. But if you can put something together that helps them integrate back into their own home life, yeah, you're right. And I think someone said it just earlier about, you know, your whole friend culture changes as well, because your friends move on, they've changed, they've grown. Like, the truth is, though, once you're with a friend, you go back to being the normal who you were, like from 10, 20 years ago. It'll be like yesterday. But it's bridging that gap. It's bringing them back in, and we are working on a whole project to help. And I never even thought of this area that we're talking about today. We're doing it more about retaining talent, but obviously it fits into this, what we're talking about today. So it's quite interesting to hear what everyone's aspects are. I'm talking. Yeah.
No, go ahead, Andrew.
I was just about to say, I'm talking a bit too much, so maybe.
I was going to talk about you, Andrew, because I met Andrew when we were doing something for a conference, and he talked about his Everest trip. And I think what struck me most about Andrew, and it's presumptuous of me to say maybe AGS is as well, is that the Everest, like you said, everything came crashing down for him. You know, 5 years of preparation. I remember your line, crash in 5 seconds. When the earthquake took place, that was, if you draw parallels to repatriation being involuntary, that earthquake was an involuntary experience. Nobody wanted that to happen. And Andrew got his team down to safety. And I think they recognized the leadership capacity in a total wreck situation. I mean, I actually think from an HR perspective, that's why they promoted you, Andrew. Maybe I've never told you that, but I think they could see. I mean, that was totally involuntary. That 5 years of, and to have that ability to regroup and bring everybody down. I think that speaks for itself. If I may, that's what my observer listening to Andrew's story, that's what it tells me about him.
This is a priceless enterprise that you're all participating in, and I thank you for sharing. Doreen, thank you for being on the sidelines during all this. I'd like to turn attention to you because your quote that I love is rewiring your brain. Okay, and I use that in some of the PR stuff. So why don't you give us that story about how you came up with that phrase, rewiring your brain, because you couldn't just repatriate. You wanted to go sit pets and sit houses because you didn't want to go back to something else. You're used to challenges and taking care of things.
That's funny that you frame it like that, Ed. I think that's really humorous. As we were leaving Saudi Arabia, which was looking like it would be our final expat assignment. Now, I was an expatriate, met my husband overseas, got a divorce, had a repatriate. He repatriated, and I entered the U.S., Lachelle. So one repatriation and one divorce. And then I had another repatriation to the States when we came back from Saudi. And we either had the choice to think of it as a success or a failure, but it wasn't exactly what we had hoped for. So we talked about how most of it is in our head and most of it is invisible. There's like 2 suitcases. You bring back all your stuff, you pack up the container, and your pets, your dogs, your cats, whatever, you bring them back. But then what are we bringing back emotionally and mentally? What are the lessons we learned? What are the relationships we formed? What are the financial benefits or catastrophes that you experienced? Because all of that's hidden. And one day we were talking about it, I said, well, let's not retire, let's rewire. And so we decided that you had to rewire. The body has to rewire. When I moved to Bellingham, Washington, just south of the Canadian border, where it rains most of the year after living in 110 degrees in Saudi Arabia for 15 years, I did not allow the time for my body to rewire. I didn't realize what a huge change it would mean. And so the rewiring of your brain is, how do we think about things and how do we look forward to the next challenge? So what Ed's referring to is after we did another assignment in the US, which was kind of like a foreign assignment. We were in Houston, and I'm not from the US, obviously, but for me, it was another foreign assignment, and it was wonderful. But then after we did that, we were looking for something to do, and we got into pet and house sitting across the globe. So for any of you who are interested in still traveling and living like an expat almost, or serving expats, because what we did was we would go to an expat's house in Belgium or France or somewhere, and we would take care of their pets while they went off. And we loved it. So that was my adventure. And I just say, for every repatriated person, they need to find a new adventure. Whatever the heck it is they've got to find a new adventure.
Oh, that's brilliant, brilliant. And so are you writing a book with somebody else?
I'm writing a book by myself. It's my second or third book, and it's on the subject of repatriation. But simultaneous to that, we're just starting a podcast, and that's with a partner, Sharon Fields. And we might reach out to a few of you to come on the podcast and be our guests, because clearly these are the subjects that we want to be more in the light of day. We want people to be talking about this and to be informed and to be prepared.
Yeah. Kerwin, thank you for your time here tonight. And this is your second time on Global TV. Thank you. What is different in your current day-to-day job than it was a year ago?
Ooh. Mobility is actually not as job one anymore. I take care of everything HR compliance. So every solution, every capability, new provider that we're onboarding, to go through data privacy assessment, understand how everybody's doing data protection. If we purchase any solution that has machine learning, AI stuff, we need to understand a lot better and figure out. We need to go through European Works Council. Is it inform? Is it, review? Is it approval? Hopefully not. And understand how all of these are, happening, and is there bias in a lot of these things that we're buying. Outside of that, I manage about also contingent worker program compliance side around that, so that's about 28,000 globally. And in an era where there's a lot of unemployment going on in the world, different governments, regulatory environment changes, protection for local labor, all of that. So we need to be understanding of all of those, figure out the contracts we get ourselves into, and be compliant in all of those. And then, of course, outside of that, the usual management of everything HR policy, working with internal audit, whether going to office, returning to office, what hybrid looks like, and everything else in between from a policy perspective globally.
Yesterday, I found an article that had to do with learning, a corporate article, very senior. I won't divulge the company or the name, but the position, learning and development, the role of the manager of learning and development tied in with global mobility, but turning it inside out, speaking about retaining talent, is internal mobility rather than global mobility. Now, maybe cross-border, but finding a position for me, maybe lateral move, or to latch on to somebody in another country. Maybe it's virtual, maybe I actually move, but I get training in another function within the same company rather than quit and go to another company and try to get a new position. So you must be familiar with that within HPE.
Correct. So again, I've had only two employers, 13 years at Intel, 14 years at HP, HPE, and multiple reorgs over the years. I've started doing mobility when I was at Intel, and it was tied to shared services, COE, different lines. And then when I came on to HP, initially mobility was tied to the time when I was running overall talent acquisition for Asia. That rolled up to me, and then eventually split. I had to choose one or the other, and then went with mobility, tied with total rewards, CNB stuff. So what I've learned over the years is, if I believe my direct line relationship limits my ability to be able to make a difference, then it's hard to be successful. I think it's all about figuring out, again, different verticals. We all share custody of the same customer. So if I'm with CNB, maybe the focus is a lot different. They focus on program maturity, COE design stuff. When I was with TA, it's all about how I deploy mobility in terms of how I attract individuals, university campaign, poaching talents from competitors, competing fiercely in the market, and maybe doing a little bit more internal mobility when I can see aging requisitions, and maybe when onshore talent is no longer enough of a pool. If I'm hiring in Canberra, Australia, unemployment rates are very, very low. If I'm hiring for a public sector account and they need certification, then maybe I should be leveraging talent from a different location. And in that case, at that point in time, Brexit years, then I can draw talent from UK, move them to Australia really fast. Immigration, I can compete with. Time to fill a requisition locally will take a lot longer than doing immigration international transfer. Then that makes sense. So it's, for me, it doesn't matter whether you're affiliated with, you understand the different dynamics. And for me, that comes with a lot more years and maturity, understanding the different players, the different people who sit around that table.
So I'd like to bring in Lachelle and back to Andrew, because this is exactly how to retain talent, isn't it? Is to use their skills to entice them to develop themselves by sharing a new position. Lachelle, that's exactly what you're looking at, isn't it?
Yeah, and I was just messaging Kerwin because I'm going to be dropping off soon. So first of all, apologies that I've got to leave the conversation early because it's just so dynamic. On the corporate side, yeah, I mean, you're constantly looking at that. And one of my last role at H&M was actually as the HR transformation lead, and looking to see how are we moving our talent, but more importantly, how are we communicating about moving that talent, and how are we trying to grow our team internally. So, really diving in to understand when you're doing your employee surveys, understanding where are your gaps in terms of that development, and applying that across the spectrum within your HR shared services. So mobility comes into play there, your talent team, and really trying to present, as many opportunities as you can. It's such a dynamic opportunity to really build on your team and any kind of changes that you want to see, and especially with the changing workforce. So going back to compliance, we've got a lot of changes going on in the workforce. People don't want to go back to the office. So it's such an exciting time to be involved in HR in any way. So yeah, what a great conversation today. So
you.
I need to jump off, but if anybody's looking for a project manager for something, let me know. I'm currently in the midst of trying to figure out my next step. Or if I have a head role, I can't move right now, but yeah, great conversations. Just everybody's doing such exciting stuff. So thank you for bringing together this wonderful group, Ed.
We'll do it again and come back.
Sounds
Andrew,
good.
If
you have to say
if
about this lateral move thing? That's important, isn't it?
Yeah, I think understanding what you're trying to achieve from a company point of view, but also understanding the assignees and what their needs are. And it's interesting what was just said about people have changed. They want to work from home. They do want to. They want different things, and they've realised that work is not necessarily everything. So it's a different culture that's coming through as well. And you've got to understand that and get a nice balance. And the only way I can give an example, there's two very big tech companies. I won't say their names, right? One company pays very high salaries, and the other company don't pay very high salaries at all. Except when you look at both of them, the ones with the low salary retain their staff. And when you look at why they retain their staff, it's because they have work from home days, they have choose the amount of holiday entitlement that you want. They have a flexible working hours. They have they give them dinners when they come into the office. There's free drinks. And I'm not saying that's for every company, but you've got to look at what the type of companies are. And that company does very well, pays very low, but the benefits outweigh the salary because people like to work there. The other company, for instance, that pay very high, they can't keep their staff more than a year. So, and that's when you've got to start looking at the types of companies that are out there. There's those that can, those that can't. There's some that you've got to be in the office because it's very operational, but they've got to rethink the way that people want to work, and that's a big thing at the moment that's out there.
So Yvonne, in your role as a coach and trainer, advisor within the family network within World Bank, you must see a lot of this lateral move thing.
Oh yes, we spend a lot of time. Well, I don't currently, but I used to. Looking at career growth, because we are a huge bureaucracy, and lateral moves are the way to grow your career, because it's not only a bureaucracy, it's a pyramid, and so it's hard to go up because there are fewer seats as you go up. So it is about growth. Yes, Kelvin, you want to say something?
Well, I totally understand that. I get that. I'll share some specific example. as in nothing original, but taking inspiration from everything happening around us. Pre-pandemic, we've seen onset of gig workers, freelancers, in those platforms that clicked a lot. Pandemic, all of that stuff. As an example of what we're doing again to help accelerate the momentum of those building pipelines that Yvonne you're sharing. So we deployed an internal gig platform. Again, managers can post jobs, people can sign up for that, all of those rules. So one, set that aside. And then I like Fusion. During the pandemic, we've done work from anywhere, and we've accommodated requests to do that across borders. All of that happening, put that aside. Now we try to do both of those in combination. So if you're wanting to go work from Spain during the summer, in the past, during pandemic times, we'll probably accommodate that. But now, if you sign up for a gig and you want to do 2-3 months in Spain, then we'll support that even more because now we're building pipeline. We're supporting your interest, developing, skills, competencies, exposure, and good times and bad times. Good times, there's an opportunity, go. Bad times, maybe layoffs, everything else happening in the world. You're losing your job in a higher cost location, and maybe there's an opportunity in Spain we can move you into. Why not? The transfer pays for itself in many cases. Everybody happy, you retain knowledge, you retain culture. People who move, who transfer, they tend to stay longer, perform better because they know culture, they know everything else. So things like this, picking inspiration from everything else around us and figuring out how to connect some of those together and make it work, hopefully.
I think Cohen's right there. It's looking at the environment and listening to what people really want. And I think Andrew was saying about the change in the workforce. I think as more and more Gen Zs get into the workforce, I think they want things that are totally different from those of us who are not Gen Z. There is a value to an intergenerational workforce. I'm not saying that. I think if everyone was Gen Z, it won't be that great either. But I do think that autonomy, giving me my choices. And I think that is why people take lower pay. Because we can just think of us as human beings. When somebody lets you choose, what would you like to do? You feel so much better than, when somebody tells you, I want you to do that. Could you please do that? I think we're all agreed. Every one of us does not want to work for a micromanager. Why is that the case? Because your autonomy is taken from you. I'm telling you all the time, do this, do this, do this. And I think employees are saying, let us choose, let us control the way our careers are going. And as Cohen says, if I want to work in Spain and it costs me more, that's my problem. But I want you to enable me to do that. And within that context, I might be more willing to do more. I may be more willing, and I will learn more because I want to do it, as opposed to, oh, you have to attend this training, you have to do that, but stay in Singapore and never leave, or wherever that office site is. And I think increasingly people want autonomy. That becomes almost one of your currencies, one of your salary non-monetary currencies that you are actually retaining talent with. So I think to respect that is important. Pardon? Sorry,
it's all about figuring out. It's all about, to your point, it's all about figuring out the why of the individual, what matters to them, what they value. If they value pay, if they value autonomy, if they value some combination of different aspects, exposure, etc., then figuring that out, having that engagement, that's what I'd like to think coming out of the pandemic, wherever we are right now, still in pandemic in some areas. Then that what it has taught us really is we have to value engagement more, understanding, connecting people with purpose, connecting people with, and being able to fulfill that. For me, that will always work. Timeless, and that's the key. But only if organizations, to the examples of so many others, take the time to care enough to understand that.
Sue, in your group in the Portland area of Japanese, Asian people that you're running or you deal with, do they talk about repatriation issues or cultural issues or difficulties? Is it more secretive or is it sharing?
Thank you for that question. I believe you're talking about the Japan America Society of Oregon, and my capacity is, and I work with them on do various programs. It's interesting because that's not really a kind of a cultural group. There had been something called the Intercultural Communication Institute, which had the Summer Intercultural Communication Institute that was offered every year. That unfortunately that model in the pandemic, pre-pandemic, whatever, it was such a big, unwieldy program. It was 3 weeks intensive on site at Reed College, and that was a great place to come and have those conversations. Going back to the Japan America Society, what's interesting to me is that I don't hear so many conversations about repatriation. I think there's a buildup in that case of organizations that can support people who are now living in the US, Japanese who are living in the US, for example, with schooling, that special schooling that they have for their children who are probably going to have to re-enter the Japanese school system, and they can't miss a beat. They have to do a whole extra day, full day of schoolwork every week in order to kind of keep up. So it's interesting how things are being accommodated. I don't know that any of the discussion is happening for Japanese. When I look at my intercultural community, the Society of Intercultural Education, Training, and Research, which I mentioned in the chat over there are those of us in that community. Interestingly, many of us have a Japan connection or are Japanese. So that's where we have those great discussions about, what does it mean to feel like we're an outsider in what's supposed to be our home or our new home. So I really appreciate these conversations about, how do you build community? And I think that's something that I'm very interested in. I put my name in the hat to become the next president of CITAR USA, that organization. And I would love to invite all of you to come and be a part of that. I'm thinking, who can we get for, we have, every month we have webinars and a speaking series, which I think would be an appropriate place to have these conversations, especially looking at talent, because a lot of people who started out kind of in intercultural and relocation, et cetera, are now have moved into the talent support and development piece of it, which many of you are talking about, which is really key, and also the diversity and complexity of it, and inclusiveness, and how do you make those folks feel valued in the organizations that they're in, which has a lot to do with inclusiveness and looking for those opportunities for valuing employees and giving them place to belong. So there's a whole kind of evolution, I think, in our field of not just supporting expatriates and assignments, but really looking at organizations as a whole. How can the organization from the top down have a more inclusive mindset, inclusive and global mindset, so that you are creating that where's the future of talent going to be? And I invite organizations to really look at those third culture kids. We haven't really talked about third culture kids in this communication. Those are the offspring of the expatriates who come back and they are changed, or they have potentially a global view. There's also study abroad. I have an intern, Christopher Johnson, who tried to come on this. Sorry about that. He got the wrong link, but he also has spent, let's see, he went to Korea, then he went to Japan for overseas learning. And I think that we need to be capturing and trying to get the imagination of those potentially global nomads or digital nomads who are really ready for all of these transitions. And I think that's that kind of a key word, is transitions. The expatriate experience is a kind of transition, but I think most people in life have some kind of relatable transition experience. So instead of having that out of sight, out of mind, I can't connect to you, can't relate to you, if people can start to look at how does this fit into the bigger picture of transition, and it can be moving across town, or it can be changing your organization, or can be getting, downsized. All of us have gone through some, and right now I think we're going through. Now, bear with me a moment. Are we not, in a sense, going through a re-entry or a repatriation or a reverse culture shock of going back to the new normal post-pandemic? I mean, that's a sort of on a big scale and out there, but you know, how do we process all of these transitions? So I guess, yeah, go ahead.
I was saying with TCK children, I think the whole thing, I have TCKs myself. And I used to always, my son used to always talk about, you know, but I'm a TCK, and every college application is I'm a TCK. I used to say, you know, that's great, but you have to learn, and we did it together, to quantify, okay, what does it mean? So I can deal with change, I can deal with uncertainty, or I have to learn how to deal with it. I think is better. I think none of us really like change, if we're honest, because the brain actually doesn't like uncertainty. So I think what you do is you actually learn to master uncertainty, not like uncertainty. Because if we're truly honest, none of us really likes things to be really shaky and uncertain. We learn to master that. And I think the TCKs have to learn to articulate what is it that I bring to the table that makes me talent, opposed to somebody who hasn't done this. And what is my basic, my employee value proposition? And so I'm a TCK. I have lived in 5 countries. How does this actually quantify and qualify that experience into what makes me, therefore, good talent for this job? And many TCKs actually struggle with a lot of issues, including unresolved grief, including delayed adolescence. I mean, there's a whole sort of, and unless these are resolved, just having moved doesn't actually necessarily help you to, in any way, at least I don't think so, become that much better. If I can't articulate my competitive edge to you and make you see why I would be useful to you and how I could contribute, sort of what's the point, if you know what I mean? And so I think, yes, I do believe they can. And I do think, say, if you take the pandemic, it was like going to a new country. So there were skills expatriates could use: uncertainty, you know, complete change of routine, which we all experienced during the pandemic, and finding new skills to be able to do that. And so, yes, those sorts of things, but being able to communicate, you know, I can be comfortable being the stranger in the room. Yes. That's what the TCK can do. Now, not all TCKs, some can and some can't.
Right.
But that's the ability to communicate that, I think, that
it's so important.
Would be useful. I mean, it would be useful. I'm not
and
saying
I think, Yvonne, there's much more training out there now. We're seeing in some of the fields that you and I are connected in that there's a lot of courses for TCKs. There's a lot of courses being built and being delivered to the international schools all across not all across the globe, but in certain parts of the globe, we have inroads. And they're really doing good work. There's also more science being done because people are finding that TCKs have more ACEs, which is adverse childhood experiences. And as these ACEs build up in their lifetimes, it can develop trauma. So recently we were interviewing Lisa Liang, who wrote the One Woman show on being an alien, which is basically about living place to place all of her life around the world. And her best line from the show was, "Your children are not balls, they do not bounce." And she repeated it several times. And her message essentially is, some children do well, some do not. Like you said, Yvonne, 2 of them in the same family can have a different experience. And so I think that the whole TCK conversation is like repatriation. It's huge, isn't it? It's hard to get our hands around it. And it's really important for corporations now to learn about this sector, because most corporations don't have very much experience. They move the children, but they don't have much insight into what's actually happening.
It seems that all of us are in the business of facilitating navigation of these uncertain, choppy waters. And I think that's it, is having that skill set of navigation, but also the, as Yvonne aptly pointed out, the ability to communicate how that adds value. So yes, thank you.
Eliana, what's your take on all this?
Well, there's many branches that I can refer to, but I would like to probably mention one that I haven't heard being discussed here, and it's the expectation of the company that actually sends you and then brings you back or moves you to another place. And in my experience, the expectation that they have is that you're going to work a lot, like a slave. You're going to do your job and probably the job of others. And that's something that you go knowing, okay, an expert assignment equals pretty much working more than what you work at headquarters. And because depending on the place where you work, there are some cultural differences that the sense of a timeline, of a deadline, it's different. So, and then if you don't get that work done at that specific deadline, then it's going to be on you. So there's kind of the difference in pace. So you have to do a lot of your job and the job of others. And then the goal is that the company is expecting you to nationalize or to train or do as much as you can in mentoring the nationals if you were there to do that. And it depends on really what the goals are. But I think that the company expects you to give more than 100% because you're being paid, because it's like you're given this opportunity. We're paying you for this. So you need to kind of assume that you're going to work like a slave. And it is a lot of work, and that's something that you don't, when you get sent to an expert assignment, you don't know what you're going to expect. It's a lot of work. And then when you come back, it's like you come back to headquarters, you're a stranger. You have to start all over again, building your connection, getting people to know you. The other thing is that you, as a individual contributor, when you're on an expert assignment, you have more exposure when you go to an expert assignment because you were sent there to do a specific job. When you come back to headquarters, you're just another number, and a lot, depending on how long you are out of your home country, then people forget you. And they know there's this person here. It wasn't in my case, but I know people that get lost in expert assignment, and when they have to come back, they just don't fit, and the company don't know where to put them. So the expectation of the company is that you need to build your own path and try to find a solution to all those challenges. But nobody tells you about that.
So we are always looking for sponsors, everybody, but there's no charge for this. And you'll all get a copy of this program, and feel free to chop it up if you can edit. I cannot, but some people have more skills than me, and take out what you want. We're going to make it available in a text, as you can, I don't know if you can see, but I see it. It's all closed captions, and that becomes a text, word for word. But it's all AI, so some of the words come out weird. I don't know what language the machine is speaking. But anyway, I'll send you the program for your own use. We're going to circulate it around the world. It's going to be available on my YouTube channel and, of course, on globaltvtalkshow.com. And a lot of people who are in the industry that we know and love should watch this thing and maybe share it with staff, and particularly for people who are either on assignment right now or thinking about an assignment, because this is so valuable, this dialogue and the personal take. So I thank you all. It makes my job easier when you have something to say. So thank you. Michael, what are you going to do this week? Are you
But
going to knock on doors saying, "Listen, I have all this experience. You should hire
That's
me," or
cool.
what?
I'm going to digest everything that we learned here today, because the last point that we discussed is simply the unspoken or soft benefits of assignments and expatriate assignments. So how do you pass that message on to the very beginning, or the candidates that are thinking about it? Because at the very beginning, it's very financial. What's in it for me? The housing is expensive, things of that nature. But to hone it in and to share that at the very beginning, that there's so much benefit into growing a global mindset, kids growing up in different countries and being able to absorb diversity, change. I mean, this is just an amazing experience that no one else will be able to get. And the second point is that if we, from a mobility perspective, look at repatriation just to follow the motto or follow the saying of one door closes, another one opens. If we look at repatriation as a beginning of something new, what is that new for companies? What is that new for the assignees? And defining that and honing in on that is an amazing opportunity to grow the programs in a totally different spectrum and have the mobility involved way beyond the assignment in and of itself. It's a ways to grow this, to grow the structure of the organization and the senior leadership. Which those are just amazing takeaways. So thank you all for sharing.
Thank you,
I
Yvonne.
think if I may say, I think, the company, back to Ileana, I think it's a very complex process because you have seen and unseen players. The family is an unseen player. You have the company who's very much as Kelvin was saying, in the end, they're the one paying the bills. So they have an eye on the ROI. And then, of course, there's the staff individual employee himself and herself who's looking for career growth, purpose, and all. So it's a very multifaceted, complex process. And I fear, Elena, that a lot of companies don't think end to end. Like, why am I sending? What do we want them to do? What do we learn? How does this contribute to the strategy? I'm not saying they don't. I'm not sure. Only because of the research evidence that you see looking at retention rates when they return. As if they had done that, maybe the drop-off rate won't be so high. So that's how I'm not saying that they don't do it, but it probably could be improved. So everything is clear. But I think sometimes, there was a chat comment here about insurance, repatriation because of taxation and things. I think there's always a danger when you have a one solution way of one criteria decision making, meaning financial. And often people go. I mean, I've done it. I mean, I work with a lot of people who we send not at the moment. Now I do family support, but in the past. And it's about benefits. It's about, are you paying my tax or you're not paying my tax? You paying my rent or you're not paying my rent? It's purely, are you paying the schooling? It's always on the financial level. And actually, that's not the right question. If we go back to, are you paying schooling or not schooling? The better question is, what is the best fit for my child? Not whether you pay, I pay. And if you don't, we'll do B, and if you do, we'll do A. But it may not be the best thing. So I think one needs to be mindful that it can't just be about money, because life is not just about money. So I think it is very complicated, and there are multiple stakeholders in it. Unfortunately, I feel, my personal thing is families. Often the families are unseen players, and actually the impact on the unseen players sometimes more than on the seen players.
Oh, most
so
definitely.
All to say is it is complex. It's not plain sailing. Maybe Andrew is worse than climbing Everest. I don't know. I don't want to try to climb Everest.
I want to go on one of Andrew's adventures. That sounds like fun.
Yeah, I prefer a mini one nowadays, though. No.
Yeah, maybe not Everest, but
Can you have an adventure for the rewirees, please?
Yeah, there we go.
We
I
can
like
put
to
something
take on
together.
that job of expat pet sitting. I love that.
Yes,
Oh,
yes.
yeah. Happy to share. Just reach out and I'll tell you exactly how to do it.
This has been wonderful. So we have a guest, unannounced guest with us, Saria P. Welcome. If you care to come on and be visible and introduce yourself, we welcome you. And we always like to share. So I thank you all for being on the program. We're going to try to do this kind of a topic. It'll probably morph into something else as we go forward once a month. All right. And so I'll let everybody know when targeting a date, or be about 30 days from now. And I certainly welcome you back. Thank you for being on Global TV again.
Thank you,
Yvonne,
Ed. Thank you,
Yvonne,
Thank
everyone.
you so much, Edwin.
Yvonne,
Thank
you
you.
look after your surgery. I'm not going to divulge any secrets here, but you look terrific, and thank you for being here.
Thank you all. It's been a
Nice to
pleasure.
see you all.
And I hope to meet all of you again and join join the CTAR USA. And thank you, Edwin, for bringing us together like this. This is fantastic.
Well, I love doing this, and you guys make my job easy. So
Yes,
thank you.
indeed.
Thank you for
Thanks,
having us.
everybody.
Thank
Bye-bye.
Thank
you.
you.
Enjoy your
Bye-bye.
day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
I save my chat here.
Okay, so Andy, I expect to hear from Cull and on the official announcement, and
Yep.
we'll deal with that when it comes.
Yep. Yeah. In fact, I'll give him a call probably towards the end of this week.
Yeah. Okay.
Just to catch up on everything. So yeah, it's looking good though, because you've got
I
two
know
speakers.
it's great. Well,
Yvonne,
we have three. If she comes, right?
Yeah, Yvonne said to me, "Look, I'll be out in the UK, so I'd love to be a speaker." And I was like,
Oh,
"Look, that'd be great."
absolutely,
You know, I just
absolutely.
wanted to make sure she was actually okay herself. Obviously, you know about her
Yeah,
illness and stuff. So
she shared that. Yeah,
she's a strong lady, really is
yeah,
a strong lady.
yeah. Anyway, thank you very much, and let's stay in touch.
Yep, definitely. So
Okay,
have a good one, Ed. Okay,
ciao.
see you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you. This is Ed signing off in San Diego, and there is a rainbow. Keep chasing it. Thank you.